The V-Perm is notorious for being a bad PLL case. Well, now things are different. Today I'll be showing you the best V-Perms I know, the finger tricks I use for them, and my thoughts on each of them. This is a new V-Perm algorithm that's quickly gaining popularity. Here's how I finger trick it, but there are other ways to do it. I start by pushing here, and then middle finger, double flick, index, middle, and index finger here. Some other ideas for finger tricks are you could start like this instead, and then if you get your finger up here for the U prime, then you can actually do F wide prime like this. Then you would use your middle finger for this next move, and the rest should go the same. There is also the inverse of this algorithm, and I don't think it's as good, but I'll show you how I would do it and why it's not as good. There are two main ideas for how to finger trick this. One is to do this, and then do soon from here, which needs a ring finger drag like that. And then this finger trick. I personally would not go for this execution because I think it's very similar to the original, but it's just a little bit harder. The other way is to do a rolling R prime to stay in home grip and then do all the F wides from home grip now. So here is soon from home grip, which is also a bit easier. And then here you have to do this or this. So I'll show what happens if you do this one first. You do F wide like this. Or if you do this, you would do the F wide like this. The slight advantage of this version is when you do F wides from home grip, you don't need to move your hand backwards to do either of these. I don't think that's enough of an advantage to actually use this algorithm, which is why I wouldn't do it. So between these two, I would choose the first one and not the inverse. This is also a recently discovered algorithm, but it's kind of funny if you just look at the algorithm. It doesn't look like it should be any good at all, but somehow it is. For this one, you hold the block here and pay attention to the finger tricks because they are very tricky. After the R prime, you have to do the U prime not as how you normally do it, but you have to get your index finger at least touching the top a little bit. That way you can go straight into the F prime that's coming up. And you have to use this finger for the F prime because you have this S coming up as well. And then here, middle finger for U, and the rest is pretty straightforward. And you end with PLL on this side, so any AUF would have to be a right turn. I cannot do this fast, but I will try. Wow, first try, that never happens. This is what usually happens. Now, why on earth would you use this algorithm? Well, the move count is really low, but it's not that simple. This actually is slower than it appears from the move count. The reason for that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All 6 of those moves were finger turns and not wrist turns. For most algorithms, you can kind of judge them by move counts because they are mostly just wrist and finger alternating turns. But when you have only finger turns, then you have to have a much lower move count to be equally as fast. Now, all that being said, that doesn't mean this algorithm couldn't be good. I just think it would take you a lot more effort to get it equal to other algorithms. Now let's briefly revisit the old standard algorithm. This algorithm goes like this. Cube rotation, index, middle, and then here either index or thumb. Not only is the cube rotation slow, but it is very easy to mess up on. So instead, you can just face here and do the initial moves as F moves, which gets rid of the cube rotation, and that would look something like this. And then index here, and push back. This is just one way, I'll show another way afterwards. Middle finger, and then the rest is the same as usual. Another way you could do this starts the same way, but then here instead of this, you would do this middle finger, and then do this, and index, and then the rest is the same. Either way, the total number of hard finger tricks is the same, and there's no finger overworks, so you can pick whichever one you want. Eliminating the rotation is nice, but it's not as good as it seems, and that's because of these 4 difficult flick turns in a row, and then there's also the factor of doing the AUF before the algorithm. For example, if you're going to start with the block here, then you have to do this and then this, which you could do like this, but then that is also kind of difficult. Generally speaking, any PLL that begins like this If you can find an alternative, usually that would be better, but in this case, you're going to overwork fingers if you don't start like this. One extra thing I want to add is this algorithm includes a lefty thumb move in both directions, and a lot of people can't do this with their left hand. You can just do the right hand instead. So that means instead of RUF, you would do it LUF, and that would make it easier for right hand thumb moves if that's the only one you know. Now, this is the V-Perm I've been using for a while, and there actually are 4 variations of this algorithm that are all very good. This is the algorithm I've been using with the block here, and it goes like this. Regrip during this first U prime move, which is a big regrip, so instead you can do it like a rolling R, so your thumb stays on front. Then this is a smaller regrip. These two at the same time. Drag ring finger. This I do with both fingers at the same time just because it's more consistent. Another way you can do this that eliminates the regrip goes like this. Do the rolling R to begin as well, and then the rest of this is just from this grip. And then like this, and here go up or down. I'll show down. So for 2 harder finger tricks and 2 harder grips later on to save a slight amount of time during that regrip, I don't think that's worth it and I go for the simpler version, but if you think that's worth it, then I think that's a really good execution as well. It may be even faster, but I just would mess up more on it. This one is also very popular, block here, and you start with a regrip. Regrip during that D move to here, and then push here and push here at the same time. The regrip in the beginning looks bad, but it's actually not quite so bad when it's at the start, because if you begin out of line, which you usually will 3 out of 4 times, then you can just do the U move as you regrip. So this becomes a soft regrip instead of a hard regrip. However, if you start right from this angle, then this will be a hard regrip. So it's still worse than not having a regrip, but it's not as bad as it seems. There are 2 reasons I don't use this algorithm. One is the initial regrip. I just prefer when there isn't, if there's an equally fast algorithm. And the other one is right here. I don't like this sequence of moves. I mess up on it a lot. This one is the inverse of the one I use. So you start with a rolling R2, which means like this. You end with your thumb on top, and you do the R2 with your index finger. Then here, and here you can do this and this at the same time, or if you can also do these 2 at the same time. And during this D move regrip, one little thing is these 2 moves at the same time, at least for me, it is very difficult to get that fast and consistent. But if you can do that part really well, I think this algorithm is really good. This one is the inverse of the second one I showed, so it goes like this. In terms of how easy the finger tricks are, this is actually the best one because this is the only somewhat difficult turn and every single other one is really easy. It does get a bit harder once you try to avoid the regrip, and I'll talk about why avoiding this regrip is actually kind of important. How to avoid the regrip is like this. So the first 2 R2s you do not regrip, but then for this one, you have to do a middle finger rolling R2 prime, which means you're going to go down for R prime, and the second R prime is going to be middle finger only. After this, your thumb's still on the bottom, and everything is the same as before. So if you get it from here or from here, you can just do the U move as you regrip, and you can get the easy finger trick version. But if you get it from here, you don't want to waste time regripping, so it's nice to have a regripless option. But if you get it from here, then this is where you have to avoid the regrip. If you do U2 with this hand, then you don't have time to regrip. But if you do U2 with the other hand, which is what you might think, you actually don't have a move for the coming D prime. Or you just U2 with this hand and go into the regripless version. And one more downside to this algorithm is if you have an AUF afterwards, it can be more difficult than with other algorithms. So out of these 4, the most straightforward finger tricks wise is actually going to be the first one, but there are pros and cons to all the other ones, so you may pick those instead and they're perfectly fine as well. There are 2 more algorithms I want to mention. I won't go too much into them. The first one is all R and U moves except for one regrip in the middle, and I think this one is quite good except that it's a little bit long if you count the moves. Then there's the fastest known V-Perm, which we've known for a long time, except it has a cube rotation before you start. Even with the cube rotation, it can be quite fast, but I don't think it's worth the risk. So there are a lot of vperms here, and I'm going to narrow it down to my recommendations, so I'll start by removing these ones. Not that they couldn't be good, I could be wrong, and maybe you really believe in one of those and you can just go for it, but I just wouldn't be comfortable recommending these ones to other people because I don't think it's as good. For the rest of these, they come in a variety of finger tricks and different amounts of risk, so it's really up to what you're good at and how much risk you're willing to tolerate. Maybe you're really good at RUD moves, maybe you're very good at that cube rotation, or maybe certain finger tricks just feel a lot faster to you than other sets of finger tricks. There is no objectively right answer for what to choose, and between all of these, there's such a big variety that I think everyone should find one you could at least be very comfortable with. And if you want to be as fast as possible, you may just pick a different algorithm depending on the situation. There are so many good vperm algorithms now, but let's be honest, vperm is never going to be fast, at least now it's acceptable. And consistent. Sometimes. So I actually made this video because I was going to do one for all the PLLs, but then I realized there were just too many for vperm that it probably had to be its own video. And that's kind of crazy because vperm used to be that case that only had one good algorithm. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.